Roger, I've been dying to hear what you think about this proposal. What do you think about the plan Warren laid out in fairly decent detail?
So I really like what Elizabeth Warren is doing. To be clear, she first reached out to Tristan Harris and me back in the summer of 2017 with her early thoughts relative to what was going on in technology. And I was incredibly impressed by the insights that she had in comparing what was wrong in tech to what she had seen go wrong in the banking business, where essentially you had markets in which one side had vastly superior information and was able to control the information available to the other side, and where people who made markets were also participating in them. And so when this thing came out, I've studied it very closely. And I believe antitrust is essential in two different ways. First is the big tech companies, really I'm talking about Google, Facebook, Amazon, are blocking competition from startups in their immediate area. They're basically causing innovation to come to a stall in and around the core internet. And they've been amazingly successful at this. And I just think that's a terrible idea. I want to end that. And Warren is very much on that issue. And antitrust, it's a super pro-growth way of doing that. Historically in tech, starting in '56 with the AT&T consent decree, through IBM, the second AT&T breakup case, Microsoft, you've seen massive new industries created by using antitrust to stop the incumbent from dominating new spaces. So I like that. I also like the notion of preventing companies, the topic we were just talking about relative to Apple, companies that operate markets from also participating. Google and Facebook do this in advertising. Amazon does this in its marketplace. And I just think that should stop. I think the cross-subsidies and cross-sharing of data are also really, really bad. And I believe that Warren's proposal is a first step down that, and I'm very supportive. I recognize the people who point out that the history of tech, was misinterpreted in some of the statements that came out there. I really couldn't care less. And the reason I couldn't care less is because I think the issues in tech, the power situation, the dominance of the public square, the manipulative technologies that people are using, the surveillance that is now pervasive in our lives, that's just bad for society, and we should not allow that. That the new tech companies are a little bit like they're kind of like the companies of the early 20th century, the robber barons, so Standard Oil and JP Morgan and all.
I should point out, Roger, that there's no real breakup threat under today's laws and under antitrust precedent. So a lot of things would have to change. A lot of lawmakers would have to get on side. Do you see a better argument to break up Facebook or Google or Amazon or Apple? Which one of those four companies do you think presents the best case that serves Elizabeth Warren's argument?
Let us be clear, right? This is a position. There's no guarantee we finish there. But you want to start with a position that says we're going to do something really dramatic. We may be open to finishing somewhere else. And this is where I agree with both Senator Warren and Senator Klobuchar. And I think both of these two really understand this issue. And, whether you break them up or not is less important to me than you prevent them from operating in ways that stall the economy, which is what we've got going on right now. I think you can achieve some of this without breaking them up. But the threat of breaking them up is the way you get them to the table to have the conversation that we need to have. And I just want to be super clear about something. I'm really excited about the strides we've seen in the Trump administration, particularly in the Federal Trade Commission and the Antitrust Division of the Justice Department. In my own conversations with them, what I've found is that these are people who understand that there is something really wrong with what's going on in tech right now, and that antitrust is the most pro-growth way of dealing with that. And they are the antitrust tools in the regulatory toolbox. And both of them are doing things right now that are a big, big change from what we've seen in antitrust under the Obama administration or before them in the Bush administration. So I look at this and I don't think this is going to be partisan. I think this is a right versus wrong issue, not a right versus left issue.
That said, Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, these are four different companies. Yes, they're all tech companies. Yes, there are some overlapping businesses. But do you think any one of these is more a sort of culprit or a target than another?
Well, I think Google is by far the most effective at this, right? They had this insight in 2002 that, you know, when they were trying to improve search, they would gather all this data, and they discovered they only needed about 1 or 2% of it to improve search. So they went looking for what they could do with the other 98%, and they discovered they could use it to predict behavior. So then they go in and they do Gmail because they want to find out who these people are. And with Gmail, they set up so they could machine read all the emails, which would tell them what people's behavior was going to be, because people would tell you an email. And then they wanted to know where they were, so they created Google Maps, and then they start things like Street View, where they drive up and down the streets taking pictures of everybody's private spaces. And then, you know, they do the satellite version of that, and then they do Google Glass, and now you've got Google Home, right? So you're putting audio into everybody's houses, and they're basically taking away all of our privacy, where privacy is defined as our ability to make choices without fear and without being exposed by others. But they're also taking away our pricing power, because they manage our access to information just as they manage the access of anybody who has something to sell. They manage their access to consumers. And essentially, they're centralizing the whole economy in the hands of Google, number one, then Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and Verizon. They're the 5 guys who are at the core of that strategy. And let's face it, it's a brilliant strategy. I just think we need to have a conversation as a country. Why is it legal for corporations to own and trade our most private data? Why are they allowed to buy and sell and trade our credit card transaction data, which they get from, you know, Experian and Equifax and TransUnion? Why are cellular companies allowed to sell our location? Why are health and wellness apps allowed to sell data that if it were a hospital they wouldn't be able to sell? Why, you know, are any internet companies allowed to sell our our passage history, our search history online?
Does Apple stand out to you from the rest because of
Apple
their stance
clearly,
on privacy?
Apple's not perfect, right? A lot of what they do in China I object to, but what they're doing in this area, I think they're fantastic. And so the reason why I have mixed feelings, and I'm kind of hoping that there's a way for them to avoid the antitrust problem, is because I think Apple is trying to be a good guy, and they've really succeeded. I mean, the iPhone actually does protect your privacy and your security in ways that Google's Android phones, which is pretty much everybody else, does not. And, you know, I want to reward Apple for doing all that stuff, so I don't tar them with the same brush, even though there are clearly areas where they're vulnerable. And, you know, the Spotify case would be one of them.